Let's go on an adventure to discover the meaning of tourism around the city of Madrid, and probably also one thing or two about the history of Madrid itself. Don't you think it will be easier just to make the visit to Madrid from your bed? I mean, look into images on Google or to videos. Here is something that you may not see just by exploring the city on Google Maps, but by taking part of it, on it. The city of Madrid has been expanding not only in 2D, in 2 dimensions, but on 3 and even 4D. I'll try to explain that. The city of Madrid has been expanding in 2D in as much as a small castle with a few houses became a much larger city to become what it is nowadays, covering a huge extension that in the past used to be covered by trees, valleys, by the countryside basically. Madrid, however, has also grown 3D, vertically. This is something we find in most archaeological sites. We see an example of that in the Catedral de la Almudena, that is next to the Islamic walls. The walls are on a much lower layer of the city, and next to the walls we might expect buildings from the Islamic and early Christian age of Madrid. However, they have built the cathedral right on top, so we cannot see anything from the lower layers. Probably near the walls of the Islamic city that we are going to visit, there were the houses of some of the most important Jewish families, and we can't see that because there is a building on top of it. Another example of that is how the city walls of Madrid have mostly disappeared, but the ruins are still holding some modern buildings. And we see that when houses like this one are using the shape of the wall to elevate new stores, because the basis of the building are basically the city walls. Finally, the city has been expanding also in 4D. That means that as culture changes, the same spaces acquire new meanings. This is something close to what we might expect from an artwork that has been used for a meme. The artwork has been cropped, edited, changed, and now it has a new meaning as a meme. So even though it is the same, the meaning has changed. That happens with buildings, streets, everything in Madrid. And I want you to realize that in your visit. For example, a normal shop may become a touristic attraction just because it has become extremely old. So maybe a shop from the times of the Catholic monarchs that worked as a pharmacy now has become a touristic attraction just because it's a really old pharmacy, and tourists are not buying ibuprofen there. They are rather having the experience of visiting something incredibly old. Okay, their meaning has changed. A normal house has become a national monument just because it was the house where Cervantes used to live. All of this becomes clear when you visit Madrid, but only if you have this perspective. I want you to have these glasses when you look at Madrid on our visit. In this video, we are going to distinguish 5 stages for Madrid, just to make things clear. The first one is Madrid as a town in Al-Andalus. So this is the Ummah, the Muslim period. The second one is Madrid as a town in Castilla, in Castile. So ruled by Christians in a feudal society. The third one is Madrid as the capital of the Hispanic monarchy under the Habsburgs and also the Bourbon dynasty in the 18th century. Okay, this is feudalism, but also authoritarian and absolute monarchy. The fourth one is Madrid once it is affected by the Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution. Now, it's no longer an absolute monarchy, it is a liberal or authoritarian, also nationalistic system with Congreso de los Diputados, elections and parliament. Okay. and affected by the Industrial Revolution. So it is an industrialized economy that no longer is based on agriculture and livestock, and the products and the population will quickly rise. And finally, we have a post-industrial Madrid focused on the service sector and tourism. Okay, a tertiary sector economy. That is the Madrid we live nowadays. Okay, so let's go for it. Why does Madrid exist as a city? Madrid is quite special compared to other European capitals. It is the only capital in Europe founded by Muslims and whose name comes from Arabic. Madrid is created around 860-880 as a hisn, as a castle, a Muslim castle to defend the trade route between Toledo and Alcalá de Henares, okay? Defending a trade road. And when you see the original location of Madrid, you can imagine how this works. It was on the top of a hill, on a river terrace, far away from the river Manzanares. It was very difficult to climb from Manzanares all the way to the castle. And from that upper position, you can see around the whole area, okay? So that was the creation of Madrid. And at that time, Madrid will only have like 2,000 people, maximum 3,000 people. Madrid was a really tiny village formed by people cultivating the area around and especially focusing on the defense of the castle. That at the same time is defending Toledo and the trade routes. There is not much left from the Andalusian period of Madrid. The original town is now right below the Catedral de la Almudena. So you can see a part of the Islamic wall in the park of Muhammad I, because this was the emir in Cordoba when Madrid was created. You can see the Islamic wall and you cannot see anything behind, because behind you have the ruins, and on top you have the street, and on top you have the cathedral. So not much to see. There are small remains of towers and things here and there. Some mosques were used as churches, and there are some remains, but very little. And the original part of the city, the castle, has been rebuilt once and again by the Christians until what it is now, El Palacio de Oriente. That was the Muslim Alcázar, okay, Alcázar. But the style nowadays corresponds to the last version of that castle, when it was reformed in the 18th century after a fire. So now it looks like totally neoclassic style, nothing like a Muslim Alcázar. It will look something like the castle of Medinaceli on a small version, of course, really small version, but now it looks completely different. Actually, the cathedral that is on top of all of this is called the Catedral de la Almudena, in honor of the Virgen de la Almudena. The Virgen of the Almudena, the Virgin, comes back from the story of a miracle that happened when the city was conquered by the Christians. As they conquered the city, they found an image of the Virgin inside the walls. And the Arabic name for the walls is Al-Mudaina, the walls. So they call it the Virgin of the Walls because it was found inside the walls, this icon. And it became like a huge relic for the city. Actually, these kind of stories exist in the Middle Ages as a way to legitimize conquests, especially religious-based conquests. As the Christians conquered the city, they want to say this city was ours before, just like most of the Iberian Peninsula was Christian before the Muslims came. So by placing an icon in the walls, we are saying before the Muslims we were here, and therefore this is our legal land and nobody can take it, not even the Muslims. So it's going to create a story giving reasons for the Christians to hold the city instead of the Muslims. In 1085, the King Alfonso VI of Leon conquers Toledo. Therefore, the middle frontier of Al-Andalus falls, and all the towns around, including Madrid, fall as well. Madrid will become a Christian villa. It will become part of the feudal system that exists in the Kingdom of Leon, Castilla, and so on and so forth, with lords and vassals. Madrid becomes a Villa de Realengo. That means that the Lord of Madrid is not some feudal lord, it's going to be directly the king. And that is usually very good, because you don't have to ask your lord to talk to the king, direct connection with the king. Madrid is gonna be considered something called Comunidad de Villa y Tierra. That means the community of town and land, let's say. The town is Madrid itself until the city walls. New city walls will expand as the city keeps growing. You can find a piece of those walls in the underground of the Foster's Hollywood near the metro station of Opera. That is the town. And then the tierra, the land, the countryside, it's going to be the area around Madrid, more or less the area of the actual municipality, the city council, minus some land. There you have some little villages, Fuencarral, San Martín, Carabanchel, Aravaca. Those are going to be villages outside Madrid. Madrid will not expand to the west. Geographically, it's very difficult to walk from the river into the castle, and probably the kings also want to keep the castle clear for defense purposes. It is going to expand to the east, from the Plaza Mayor all the way to Puerta del Sol. The Puerta del Sol is called like that, Sun Gate, because the sun rises up in the east, and this gate was on the east. So the sun was coming directly from that gate. And beyond La Puerta del Sol, you have La Calle de Alcalá, because it's the road that is leading to the city of Alcalá de Henares, remember? Okay, you also have the Gate of Toledo, La Puerta de Toledo, leading all the way to Toledo, and so on and so forth. You also have the Calle de Fuencarral, because it's going to the village of Fuencarral, part of the Tierra de Madrid. Okay, so very functional names for the roads. But being a Christian city, this Christianity is gonna feel strongly on the identity of Madrid. Now they are gonna call it Marguerite. And finally it's gonna be Madrid. As I say, Christianity is gonna influence how the city develops. Not only you will have plenty of churches, and you're gonna have legends like the Virgin of Almudena, and also we have the patron of Madrid, a saint living during the Al-Andalus times in Madrid, called San Isidro. Not only that, but the street names are not going to be so easy as Calle Fuencarral, Calle Alcalá. You're going to have many street names after saints and after Christian festivities and after Christian stuff. The city is going to become Christian by putting names and memories that link everything with Christian story. It is a way to reinforce the power of Christianity in the city's history and the history's identity. Some other streets will be named after specific jobs and guilds, so people working on the same kind of tasks, another characteristic of medieval societies. Although the city is going to be ruled and mostly inhabited by Christians, Muslims and Jews are going to live here. Muslims are going to live outside the city. They're going to have some buildings, and you're going to see their traces in the art called Mudéjar. Mudéjar art is basically Andalusian art after Al-Andalus. So it's going to have strong influences of all the previous Islamic style and so on and so forth, but applied to mostly Christian buildings. Jews are gonna come and live in the city as the city becomes bigger and more prosperous. By the time when the Jews are expelled from Castilla, around the year 1492, the city of Madrid will have around 10,000 inhabitants, okay? And they start to have more specialized jobs in the city. The powerful Jewish families probably lived near the Alcázar, near the center of power. So the Jewish area can be considered to be underneath the Cathedral of Almudena. Ironically, we cannot see all this area and all the diversity it contained. It was an Andalusian town, then it became a Christian part of Madrid with Jewish and Muslim communities and so on. We cannot see it because they built a massive cathedral on the top. The situation for the Jews became more dramatic at the end of the 15th century when anti-Semitic pogroms started to happen. Around the year 1480, the Jews have been expelled from the city center. Now they are living in different parts outside the city. We are told that there was a synagogue around Príncipe Pío and Madrid Rio, so near the river, outside the city gates. And in 1492, you're gonna have the expulsion of the Jews or their forced conversion. All this violence against the Jews come from all the social tensions that are happening at the end of the Middle Ages. Especially in Castilla, the situation was very easy for the nobles as the kingdom kept expanding to the south, conquering lands from Al-Andalus. It was easy for the Christians for the Christian nobles to expand their lands by conquering new stuff. Now, when the conquest of Muslim lands has stopped, if these nobles want to make a business and keep expanding their estates, they're gonna need to attack people that are actually living in Castilla. Nobles will take lands from Madrid. At some point, the King of Castilla tries to give the whole city of Madrid as a lordship to the King Leo of Armenia. And some noble families will finally change the way Madrid is ruled, moving from an open council where everyone can, all the neighbors, vecinos, can have a say and a vote, of course Christian neighbors. They're gonna transform Madrid into a town where only a few families have all the power. This is the way these nobles try to have more and more power, by closing Madrid and ruling it among themselves, or by conquering pieces of Madrid like Alcobendas. Do you remember the history of Alcobendas and San Sebastián de los Reyes? Alcobendas used to be a village inside the Tierra de Madrid and is taken by the nobles. You can see all of this in the city of Madrid nowadays. When you go to the Plaza de la Villa, you can see the huge tower of Lujanes, the house of Lujanes, where this family used to live. And you can also see the house of Cisneros. Those are buildings made for the elite, people that are well off and want to keep concentrating power. In the meantime, we have the ruins of the ancient church where the open council was held. At the end of the Middle Ages, a few families are going to discuss all the politics in the name of the king. So the power has been concentrated even further. The third stage in our history of Madrid starts in 1561, when Madrid becomes the capital. Why does Madrid become a capital? Capitals are usually located in the biggest cities in the kingdom. In this case, Madrid again will be selected for security reasons. Madrid is in the center of the peninsula, so it's easy to defend from any attack. So no one is going to attack Madrid with a fleet like England attacking La Coruña. The French are far away from Madrid. They cannot invade it so easily. We see how becoming the capital transforms Madrid. The buildings that you find in Madrid belong to really powerful houses, because now if you're a noble and you want to live near the king, you're going to have a house in Madrid. You are going to find specialized businesses like pharmacies and other things that are made not for common people but for the court and the powerful people living here. You're gonna find government buildings where the administration of justice and other tasks are dealt with on a daily basis. And you will find some places created for the monarchy, for the kings, like the gardens of Retiro, that originally were meant for the nobility, where you had a lake, where naval battles happened, and so on and so forth. Finally, the church is gonna grow in power even more, as all these noble houses are making donations. And in times of crisis, the church is a very reliable agent that will buy more and more estates of nobles that are ruining themselves because of the crisis. So you will find lots of churches around Madrid. As the court is settled in Madrid, you will find also intellectuals, artists, writers, all these kind of people living in the city. So this is the place where Velázquez painted many of his artworks. This is the place where Cervantes and Lope de Vega lived, okay, and Calderón de la Barca. We find many of these houses in what used to be a really cheap place in Madrid, because all these artists didn't have huge wealth, let's say. They were in an economic desperate situation, waiting for the king or any other noble to pay them. They live in a cheap place that is now called El Barrio de las Letras, okay, far away from the Alcázar. In this time, the artistic movements are the Renaissance in the 16th century and the Baroque in the 17th and early 18th century. With Renaissance, the ideal cities start to be more regular, with wide streets and also straight roads that are not as irregular as medieval cities. However, as Madrid was growing rapidly, there was no such a control of the streets, and they still look very regular. We are in the Renaissance, but the city looks very medieval, in as much as the roads are narrow, with a few exceptions, like the Calle de Alcalá, that becomes wider and wider as we approach El Retiro, the gardens of Retiro. During the Baroque era, we see the creation of huge public spaces by the monarchs, that the kings are starting to have some control over the creation of spaces, public spaces in the city. This is the case of La Plaza Mayor. La Plaza Mayor used to be two separate squares, small squares with houses in between, really difficult to move around. La Plaza Mayor opens the space and creates one single scenario where public ceremonies can happen, where trade can be more regulated, and so on and so on. During the 18th century, the Hispanic monarchy loses its role as the hegemonic or main power in Europe, but they will keep the possessions in America. Some kings during the 18th century, this time the Bourbon dynasty, not the Austria dynasty, will focus on creating nice places, nice monuments in Madrid itself. This is especially the case of Carlos III, or Charles III, that was called the best mayor of Madrid, el mejor alcalde de Madrid. Well, making buildings perhaps, ruling as a despot, you choose.
Let them eat cake.
Okay, Carlos III ruled in the second half of the 18th century. Therefore, his artistic style was neoclassic. From Carlos III, we have the Royal House of the Post Office. This is the building in La Puerta del Sol, where the bell rings in New Year's Eve. We also have La Puerta de Alcalá, that separated the city of Madrid from the road to Alcalá de Henares. Again, a clear case of neoclassic style, recreating Roman and Greek art. We also have El Paseo del Prado, a garden-ish area with monuments in between the city of Madrid and the gardens of Retiro. In that area we have the fountains of Cibeles and Neptuno, again with classical styles, and now they are very famous because Neptuno is the fountain where Atlético de Madrid meets for, celebrating, and also Cibeles is the space for Real Madrid. And finally, we have other palaces around Madrid where kings used to live. Not only in Madrid, but we have, well, during the Austria dynasty, we have El Escorial. And with the Bourbon dynasty in the 18th century, we have the Palace of Aranjuez. And beyond the mountains, we have La Granja de San Ildefonso. So kings are moving around the city, and as you see, this has a huge impact. Intellectuals living in Madrid, specialized shops, huge monuments that no other city will have because the kings are building stuff here, and so on and so forth. And this is going to happen for the 16th, 17th, and 18th century. Now we arrive to phase number 4, Madrid in the industrial era. In the 19th and the 20th century, the city of Madrid will suffer the consequences of two huge revolutions, mostly beneficial, but with some negative aspects. The French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution. Okay? The French Revolution is based on the ideas of the Enlightenment, an intellectual movement that started to spread around Europe from places like France, Germany, the German Principates, England, etc. And the ideas of the Enlightenment are against feudalism and traditional social order based on the lord and the vassal and traditions. This guy is the lord because his grandfather. They want to see everyone as citizens, equal. So they want also politics to be based on this principle. Kings shouldn't have absolute power. Kings should obey the ideas of individuals discussing and making arguments about politics. And the Enlightenment will also be against, skeptical about Christianity and religions, but also very critical to the power that the church has in society. The church as an institution, okay? So these Enlightenment ideas will lead to the French Revolution, and after the French Revolution fails, other liberal revolutions will come up. Liberalism will be the 19th century political ideology in countries like Spain, France, Germany, England. Okay, they will take these ideas from the Enlightenment, and you will see their consequences in the city of Madrid. So now, instead of having an absolute monarch living in the palace and deciding for everything through their ministries, now we have a government chosen by the people. We're going to see the Congreso de los Diputados, which is the Congress where the elected deputies debate about the political issues in Spain and outside. We're going to see the effects of the desamortización, how some buildings and spaces that were owned by the church but were not used are going to be sold by the state to other people, just in order to dynamize, to strengthen the economy. And we're going to see how the Christian city that used to have all these names after saints and so on are going to develop new liberal names. Liberalism will dislike these traditional saints and Christian ideas, and they will push other, let's say, secular saints. Instead of giving a street name after a saint, they're gonna name the street after a famous painter or a famous thinker or some big donor, some philanthropist, okay, like Bill Gates. We're gonna see also some secular relics, just like the saints leave relics, their bones and things they had in life. They are in the church and people pray to those relics. We're gonna have secular relics. Now we're gonna visit the house where Cervantes used to live. We're gonna have similar things in England with Shakespeare. We're gonna have the same things, I guess, with Goethe or Victor Hugo in France, and so on and so forth. And also, now that we live in a liberal society from the 19th century onwards, we are gonna wonder what unites us as a people. Now we are not loyal to our Lord or to the King. We are just individuals, same. We're all the same. So what ensures that we defend each other? Another new form of community comes up, nationalism. So this is the time when you are no longer defending the king or the kingdom or your lord. Now in this liberal society, nationalism will say that you have to defend your nation because you are part of a community defined by some symbols and traditions. There are different kinds of nationalism, some based on shared history, some based on a shared religion, some based on a shared language. In the 20th century, slowly, Spanish nationalism will focus on a shared language, Spanish. These new places of pilgrimage, these secular relics like the House of Cervantes, are going to have all these nationalistic elements. Like Cervantes is the genius of the Spanish letters, the Spanish language. And we're gonna look at famous episodes, not of history in general, but of Spanish history. This is the place where the Spaniards rebelled against the French occupation in the Independence War. This is the place where the Spanish army was formed, blah, 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 blah. All of these little places and all the Spanish flags and Spanish monuments are cases of what Benedict Anderson, an anthropologist, called banal nationalism. So they remind you that you are part of this national community and they make you feel proud of being Spanish. New national community will change things and will change the landscape of Madrid. We also have the effect of the Industrial Revolution in Madrid. Population will increase, products will be produced in a massive scale. But they are not going to be distributed equally. Most of the people are going to feel the progress of the Industrial Revolution very slowly. If you are from the upper class, now you may live in one of the new houses built in the 19th century around Retiro. Those houses have plenty of facilities. They will soon have toilets. They will be some of the first neighbors to have good public lighting, electricity, water, and huge spaces where all the family can live. They have huge windows, so the house will be really bright. All these facilities. While in working class neighborhoods, the conditions will be much worse. The houses don't have big windows. It's all, the daily life is in darkness relatively. The toilets are not one of these good facilities. It's not going to be very hygienic. What happens with the city center? Those houses are getting really old and therefore are going to be for mostly poor people. So the city center is going to be overcrowded with low-income families. This inequality will create rebellions and protests. People arguing for different systems. For example, we have the beginning of the labor movement. The labor movement will try to organize the workers of the factories and also peasants later on to protest against patrons, bosses that are crossing the red lines on how to treat workers and the conditions they have to work with and so on. So we're going to have the first trade unions. All these syndicates or trade unions will try to defend the workers. Since the workers have much less power than the upper class, they ask the workers, all of them, to unite into the trade union so they can all together protest and say, okay, we're not going to work under those conditions. We're not going to do this until you raise our salary. These protests started to happen inside industrial Madrid. In Spain, we're going to have a civil war. Many of the buildings in the city center of Madrid were destroyed because of the bombings during the war. And finally, we're going to have a fascist dictatorship in Madrid from 1939 to 1975. This is the dictatorship of Franco. After the end of World War II, in Europe, we're going to have social democracy. This is a kind of socialism that is not trying to make a revolution to achieve equality. They try to win the elections, and within the liberal institutions, within democracy, they're going to try to change society, to tax the rich, and give to the poor by creating public services. Spain, although having this dictatorship, will have this influence of the European welfare state with public services. And we are going to see how we have public buses, we're going to have an increasingly more efficient metro system, public hospitals, public schools, and so on and so forth, imitating these public services happening in Germany, in France, in England, and so on and so forth. However, from the 1980s onwards, we're moving back to the liberal situation in the 19th century. Public services are receiving cuts, and the economy is getting more free market. The increasing number of poor people without state assistance might create, for example, the situation of beggars, poor people asking for money on the streets. And the way some cities have responded to that, especially in touristic areas, is by creating hostile architecture. When they saw that beggars were sleeping on the benches that were meant to be for people passing by, they created new benches where it's impossible to sleep. You can only sit in a way that you are okay for 10 minutes, but you cannot sleep on it. This is hostile architecture trying to push the poor people away from some areas. So we arrived to phase 5, and the last one, post-industrial Madrid. From the 1980s onwards, it has become cheaper and cheaper to transport materials here and there, as well as products. It's becoming easier and easier to communicate from one country to another. It's becoming easier and easier to move your money around from one country to another. It's not as easy to move your family to one place to another, especially if you live in a poor country or in a country with authoritarian rulers, a dictatorship. Okay? This creates a situation in which companies are finding out that having a factory in Spain with well-paid workers with good salaries is not as profitable as moving the factory to a poor country where salaries are much lower. It's easier to outsource your labor. We don't need people for agriculture. We don't need people for industry. What are the Spaniards going to do? What Spain seems to do best is tourism. In the 1960s, we already had people from Northern Europe coming to enjoy the summer in Spain. Now we're going to have all kinds of tourism. If you like the beach, you go to the beach. If you like the mountain, you go to the mountain. If you like castles, there are plenty of castles here. Tourism is not a natural thing. It started happening in the 19th century when some rich members of the bourgeoisie wanted to explore other areas. Travelers that have enough money to do some kind of secular pilgrimage, just like the Christian pilgrims go to visit the holy places of Christianity, or the Muslims go to visit Mecca. These travelers want to discover the most important places of history from their point of view. So while places like Mallorca will get specialized into beach, sangria, Madrid is going to focus on cultural tourism. And what is cultural tourism? Well, visiting monuments around the city, the House of Cervantes or Plaza Mayor, and another part of culture, food and drinks, sangria, beer, and also tapas. I was feeling so sad in Germany or the UK or whatever. It's so cold there, so cloudy. Now finally I'm in the country of the sun, Madrid, and I'm having an authentic Spanish experience by eating gelato. It's still March and it's winter, but it's so nice here. Oh wow, it's so warm. I can't believe I'm having a vacation in such a amazing place. They say summer is getting hotter and hotter in Spain. I can't stand it. Can you imagine if Birmingham had the same temperatures? Oh, at least I got this thingy as a souvenir. Oh, it really makes a difference. So we can clearly see this in places like the Plaza Mayor. We see a combination of traditions. They put plaques remembering that something important happened here, and now you as a tourist can feel special because you were on that special place. They fill everything with souvenir shops where you can get something like a relic to show that you actually are a very international person because you traveled around the world and you got this in Madrid instead of in your house in Dortmund or Birmingham. You've been in Madrid and you didn't buy the typical hueve troncho. If you didn't buy this, you didn't really visit Madrid. You didn't have the real Spanish experience. And you have plenty of terraces where you can have the Spanish cuisine. This is gonna create an experience that is so economically specialized that it will become more and more fake. If you want to have the Spanish experience, you have to go to places that I usually don't go. You have to buy things that I usually don't buy, even though I live in Madrid. And you have to eat food that is not really typical, if you define typical as things we usually eat. And it only exists as a profitable business because from the 1960s onwards, with the social democracy, with the welfare state, many people in places like Germany, France, England, United States, Japan have enough money and enough labor conditions to have vacations, to have free days, to have some savings that they use to travel around and have an international experience. This has consequences in the city. So 100 years ago, people lived inside Madrid. Nowadays, Madrid is more, the city center is more and more for tourism. That means that the neighborhoods are becoming specialized for souvenir shops and really expensive businesses for tourists, while the cleanness and the care put into keeping the city center clean is going to rise the prices of the houses. And the poor people that used to live in the city center have to move out. This is called gentrificación. As a consequence, most of the houses in the city center are becoming more and more touristic. They are becoming hotels or Airbnb or places for businesses, sometimes related with tourism and not actual houses. The real life inside the city center is disappearing, and it might lead to a situation similar to the city of Venice. Hardly anyone lives in Venice now. It's a shell. It's like a marble in a museum. It looks like a typical Italian town, but only in appearance. There is no actual people inside the houses. So this is the situation nowadays. What's going to happen in the future? Well, the touristic sector is really risky. Actually, it's really easy to destroy it with just a terrorist attack, a bomb happening in Madrid. Now people are not going to come to visit Madrid because anything can happen, or a war, or a pandemic. That can destroy the touristic sector super fast. If Madrid and Spain keep integrating the country into the EU and the European Union gives funding to Spain in case of any of these things happening, the touristic sector will stay as the main thing. Because we know that if something horrible happens and the touristic sector drops, because tourists don't come, the EU will help us with money. But if we have to stand alone in a situation like that, we might start bringing back the industry and other jobs. So in case there is a disaster, we can survive with other sectors of the economy. That depends on Spain's situation inside the European Union and what the European Union wants to do economically with the whole continent. If the neoliberal measures continue, we're going to have a society that is more divided between those who are well off and those who are too poor to do tourism. And if we don't have people doing tourism, we're going to have to focus our economy on the few rich people that can visit Spain. Also, we must face the fact that as China and India and Brazil and many other countries are rising, their economies are rising, Spain may become less and less interesting, and other countries can offer cheaper tourism with really exciting attractions. This can be also linked to climate change. If Spain run out of water because precipitations decrease and the temperatures rise, we might have problems distributing water around the city. If there is a government taking care of providing basic services, we might have a rationing of water in the tap water in the next decades. If this is a complete free market economy, we might have neighborhoods with good supply of water and neighborhoods where it's really hard to just get water. And that might decrease the population in Madrid and change the shape of the city, dividing it into rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods. Something getting closer and closer to the favelas in Brazil. So basically that's everything I want you to have in mind. Now you know that Madrid is the product of several layers. Not only the city expands horizontally, but also layer after layer in 3D and by changing the meaning of each spot through time, through culture. So my advice is that not only you think of all this stuff as you visit the city, but also you teach other people who haven't watched this video about all this stuff. The best way of learning is by thinking about this and telling others. Bye!